UK newspaper The Telegraph contacts the Church of Satan for an article on the rise of Satanism, only to completely ignore our informative reply and print bullshit instead. Satanism versus the world of incompetent clickbait journalists on this episode of Satansplain.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain. Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. Before I dive into today's topic, I'd like to go over a few basics. Most of you listeners, I suspect, are Satanists who fully understand Satanism and know all of the 101 level stuff. Some other listeners, however, may be relatively new to the topic of Satanism, so it is for that reason I'd like to go over some of the basics now and then. In the previous episode, for example, I talked a little bit about the Satanic calendar. Now, Satansplain, as I'm sure you listeners have figured out by now, is a talk show about Satanism. What do I mean by Satanism? Well, I answer that question at the beginning of each and every episode of Satansplain, really, with that pre-recorded introduction of mine. I made that recording several years ago when some fellow Church of Satan priesthood members were given the challenge of describing Satanism in 30 seconds or less. Somebody had the idea of asking several of us to record our answers on video, send them in, and then they'd compile them together for a clip to put on the Church of Satan YouTube channel. So that was my answer, that was my submission. Obviously, not all of us had the same exact answer, word for word, because, we were each putting the answer in our own words. It was clear, though, that all of us were talking about the same religion, the same philosophy. We all had the same general consensus of what Satanism is and isn't. So regarding Satanism as a religion versus a philosophy, I would argue that all religions contain some sort of philosophy, but additionally have components like dogma, ceremony, ritual, symbolism, and philosophies in and of themselves don't really have that. So those of you who've read the Satanic Bible already know the importance of these components to humans and how and why they're incorporated into Satanism. When Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan in 1966, he said that he did it because if he hadn't have done it, someone else, probably less qualified, would. And time and time again, we see examples of these less qualified people, to put it nicely. Now, the word Satanism in and of itself has been around for a number of centuries, but it was always one of those reactionary words, accusatory words, a word you called somebody else as an insult. More importantly, there wasn't an actual religion by the name of Satanism. The term Satanism, with the lowercase s, again, that was used, it was a pretty general term for blasphemy against the Catholic Church and later Christians. The ism suffix, in this case, denoted not a philosophy, not a religion, but an act, a Satanism. Devil worshippers certainly existed, but that's what they were called, devil worshippers. And even then, there wasn't any consistency, it seemed, to the practice. There wasn't really a well-established devil worship religion. You had Christian scare propaganda, and then people styling themselves after that propaganda. You had groups like the Hellfire Club and other clubs of aristocrats who really just seemed to be looking for a good excuse to indulge in some blasphemy and have an orgy. But again, no consistency necessarily between one group and the next. None of them having an actual religion. No philosophy for a day-to-day life, let alone a religion or philosophy calling itself Satanism. There were maybe occult religions like Thelema that were accused of being devil worshippers by ignorant Christians, or accused of being Satanists today, but they were not Satanists. They never called themselves Satanists, and Satanists don't consider them to be Satanists. So, Satanism as an actual codified religion started, as far as I'm concerned, with Anton LaVey and the establishment of the Church of Satan in 1966. I've seen no evidence to the contrary. I myself am somebody who has studied many, many different religions over the years, and I simply determined that Satanism, as defined and described in the Satanic Bible, is the religion for me. And it's the religion that represents my convictions more than any other religion does. So I identify as a Satanist. So people will wonder, what about these other groups who call themselves Satanists but don't believe in the same thing? Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're not Satanists. And when I state this online, people will try throwing a certain buzzword at me. A buzzword I talked about a couple of episodes ago, that buzzword being gatekeeper. Oh, Bill is a gatekeeper. You're saying that your Satanism is the only Satanism. You're saying that Satanism is only this thing, and it can't be this other thing. You're a gatekeeper. People who use this word are kind of like the people who call somebody a racist or a fascist when, they can't really think of anything else. They think this means they've somehow won the argument. Oh, you're a racist. I win. Checkmate, fascist. And it's really no different from when Christians call you a sinner. You're a sinner. That means I'm right and you're wrong. Go repent. No, that's not an argument. Am I a gatekeeper? Well, you better believe I'm a gatekeeper, because with all of the misinformation out there about Satanism, like, Satanists sacrifice animals, Satanists worship the devil, Satanists are reckless hedonists who burn churches and kidnap and chop up unbaptized babies. Satanism is what Charlie Manson practiced. It's what serial killer Richard Ramirez did. Satanism is behind the New World Order and its Pizzagate, the QAnon, and, it's Hillary Clinton doing spirit cooking, or equally puke-inducing this claim that Satanism is all about empathy and human social justice and diversity. All of that misinformation and more is out there. And you're telling me Satanism shouldn't have a gatekeeper? Are you fucking kidding me? So some of the more intellectually lazy argue that I should not care. Bill, you shouldn't care what people think. Well, no, as I've said before, I am a Satanist. So when you misrepresent Satanism, you misrepresent me. And I've also said before, I'm not going to spend every waking moment fighting misinformation or think I can ever fully educate the world about Satanism. But I'm not going to just roll over either. And of course, right along with the dirty word of gatekeeper, there's the accusation of, Bill, when you say that your Satanism is the only right form of Satanism, that is a No True Scotsman fallacy. That is just being a religious fundamentalist. Well, I've already debunked this argument in Satansplain episode number 31, and probably one or two other episodes as well. But since I brought it up to briefly Satansplain it here one more time, there really are no other forms of Satanism. These different groups calling themselves Satanists are not different denominations of the same religion. The stuff they believe and practice are just way too different on a fundamental level to be considered denominations of the same religion. It is not like Protestants and Catholics, where Protestants and Catholics have more or less the same Bible, and they put the focus on different parts of the Bible, but they still have the elements that distinguish Christianity from not Christianity. So we consider them both denominations of Christianity. In this case, we're talking about, with Satanism, people who believe and practice completely different things from us, and erroneously and confusingly call themselves by the same label as us. I'm going to talk about this in more detail later as we look at an article from the Telegraph from the UK, because I think it's an example of something we see all the time. And that is, one, idiots calling themselves Satanists who don't even practice things resembling Satanism. Or if it does seem like they're practicing Satanism, they needlessly create an organization for seemingly no other purpose than to have one guy call himself the high priest of whatever it is. And two, the other thing we see all the time are clueless journalists who don't know what Satanism is and don't care. They don't care about Satanism. They don't care about facts. They don't research or think critically about anything. They just want good clickbait. So they throw Satanism in a headline. And again, this doesn't mean the fight against misinformation is hopeless. There is on occasion, thankfully, the journalist who does care and does get it right. So I got to give credit where credit's due. You know, the journalist who doesn't have to lie or deceptively twist things out of fear of being seen as publicly agreeing with Satanists. Oh, I can't agree with the bad guys. Unfortunately, Gabriella Swerling of the Telegraph is not one of those competent journalists. As we'll see when we get into the second half of the show, I'm going to share with you what she privately wrote to the Church of Satan, what we replied with, and what her article ended up saying. And you'll see that these last two things don't really match up. Now, when the Church of Satan takes the time to answer a journalist, we don't always know how it's going to turn out. Like I said, some do a great job, some do a terrible job. Or in some cases like this, some people just ignore us completely. As a Church of Satan representative myself, I have done lots of interviews over the years, whether it was a podcast or broadcast radio or a newspaper or magazine, television, whatever. Some of those turned out excellent. I'm really grateful for that. And some ended up being terrible because I was edited out of context or something else. See Satansplain episode, I think it's number 2, for an example of that. Some interviews I thought went great, but then they would never see the light of day. Maybe the interviewer was disappointed to learn I wasn't a baby-chopping devil worshiper, that, maybe he agreed with me too much. Maybe the interviewer thought, well, this guy's making too much sense. It doesn't really fit into the horrific story I was hoping to have. Who knows? One particular publication that has continuously messed up interviews with members of the Church of Satan, including me, is Vice. Vice is just a horrible publication when you get right down to it. Like I said, I myself was interviewed at least twice by Vice.com. I remember in one of those interviews, they left a keyword out which changed the entire meaning of something I said, and I tried contacting the journalist who wrote it up to get a correction. Tried multiple times, she never answered. But that was nothing compared to the interview they did with Reverend Asp, who ran Asp Apparel. It was like they made up entire bits of dialogue of things he would never say, and never did say. And it's happened with other Church of Satan members too. So, as much as I said it's important to correct misinformation on Satanism, when you have a publication like Vice, who has just screwed us over time and time again, we just have to say no when they contact us again. We say, no, it's not worth it. We're not going to waste our time if you're just going to mess up what we say and paint us badly for your own clickbait benefit. In fact, as Satanists, we shouldn't hold back in putting it in less nice terms. To further illustrate that point, I want to share a letter that was sent to the Church of Satan from Vice recently, and what our response back was. Good morning. I'm writing to you from the London office of Vice, where I work on the multi-platform team creating video for our global social media channels. I'm making a series for the Vice TikTok channel called Guest Pass, where we show a day in the life of people from around the world leading interesting lives. I'd love to feature a member of the church, specifically a young Satanist, and was wondering if you'd know anyone who would be interested in taking part. We'd need you to spend a day filming them, having them showing us what life is really like as a member of the church, and detailing their experience as a Satanist. It would be a short video profiling their day and how they dedicate time to their craft. I know everyone's practice differs greatly, so I was wondering if anyone has specific rituals that they'd be willing to show, and just hanging out with a young Satanist, showing a young newcomer to the occult. Let me know what you think, and if you know anyone who would be willing, and I can give you some more details. Thanks. Looking forward to hearing from you. Signed, Hallie Joe Yearwood, Associate Producer, Multiplatform. And here was our reply. No, absolutely not. Vice has always treated our representatives poorly. The Church of Satan is not open to anyone younger than 18, and in this current world of bigotry and persecution inflamed by a rising tide of Christian totalitarians, anyone consenting to your proposal would be putting themselves at risk. Additionally, Satanism is not occultism. Rituals are an optional private tool and not for sharing with your audience. They are not a craft. Finally, your ageism is noted, which is, in our perspective, a form of bigotry. Yes, it is no surprise that you want to cultivate your market and sucker in younger people via TikTok. We think helping you in that effort would be worse than a waste of time. It would be supporting the commercialized venue posing as journalism that Vice has become. Please do not contact us with any future messages. Signed, Administration of the Church of Satan, churchofsatan.com. So yeah, you may have noticed in that reply being a little bit facetious, perhaps, with the, talking about the state of bigotry and ageism and all that. But I think the genius of that response is kind of attacking Vice from the more politically correct angle, if you will. Anyway, people who know Vice and realizing Vice has no valid counter-argument, you should get that. I mean, it's such an inherently dumb idea anyway from Vice. Vice wants us to show a video of a Satanist in his or her personal life, their daily life, like we're a zoo animal or something, an exhibit. Do they think a Satanist wakes up in the morning and says, well, it's dusk, it's time now to stop sleeping and rise up out of my coffin bed, light the black candles and go to the altar for my incantation. Then I'll go downtown later, urinate on a church, pick up some dinner on the way back, play some heavy metal music for the next 4 hours. I mean, like, is that what they're expecting? There's no way to win this one. Like I said, I do know plenty of members in the Church of Satan who, as far as I can tell, do some pretty fascinating stuff in their personal lives. The Church of Satan is a mutual admiration society like that. But a typical day-to-day life for a Church of Satan member is obviously going to be completely different for different members. Some work in an office, some members work from home, some work in a tattoo parlor, some work in school, some are enrolled in school for that matter. Some are parents who have their hands full with kids. Some live most of the time on the road as professional musicians and entertainers. So what is Vice expecting? Somebody who just has the gothy or satanic aesthetic going? Are they expecting the most stereotypical thing they can find? I mean, there's no way to win this one because, if we show something that seems stereotypical and enforces a stereotype, then they'll take that as reinforcing the stereotype. If we show something else, and, well, first they'll stupidly assume all Satanists do whatever it is, just because there's a clip about it. Or they'll say that we must be boring because, we don't fit their expectations. Oh, this Church of Satan member works in a doctor's office. Well, I know other people who work in a doctor's office, so this is nothing special. Wah, wah, Satanists are boring. Well, we're not here for your entertainment. Sorry, Vice. And not to mention, Vice wants us to take the time to film a member's personal life, make a video out of it so that they can air it on their TikTok channel. And only if they like it, of course. I could totally see a Satanist sharing a specific thing, like a specific project, or here is the specific job I do. This is this kind of project I'm working on. But the day-to-day life, like, do you want to see me doing laundry and making trips to the post office and stuff like that? Before we go to the break, I think it's time to lighten things up again with a satanic anecdote, or as we call them here on Satansplain, a Satanacdote. Cue the Satanacdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanacdotes.
So I got this email earlier this month from Anthony, but I could tell the Satanacdote took place around Christmas time. Anthony writes, a few weeks ago I was wearing my Lamb of God beanie, a hat for the heavy metal band Lamb of God, that is. I was wearing it while shopping. As I was paying for my purchase, the cashier said, "I like your hat." She didn't strike me as a metal fan, but, who knows. I said, "Thank you." She said, "Got to remember the reason for the season." My wife and I chuckled as we left the store. Oh, that naive little Christian cashier. To add to this Satanacdote, I just want to give a similar one, but in the opposite direction. I had a friend, Sean, Warlock Crowclaws of the Church of Satan. He passed away in 2007, but on his car, he had a bumper sticker for the punk band Bad Religion. And if you've seen the band's name, Bad Religion, in their logo, you may have seen it. They have a Christian cross with a red circle and a slash over it, and the name of the band, Bad Religion, next to it. So my friend Sean had this bumper sticker, and I found it kind of strange because I never saw him listening to any sort of punk music. He listened to stuff completely different from that. He never talked about punk music. So one day I said to Sean, "So Sean, I see that you have a Bad Religion sticker. I had some friends in college who were big fans of that band, but yeah, I didn't know you were a fan too." And he said, "Oh, that's a band?" I just bought it because I thought it looked cool. I thought it was just, blasphemy, Bad Religion, and, the red circle and the slash over the cross. Oh, well, but now I have to wonder if there are Christians out there who likewise buy and wear Lamb of God t-shirts and put the bumper stickers on their car and have no idea it's the band. Maybe get, thumbs up from people honking their horns and, saying, "Yeah, oh, these must be Christians in the car. Oh, praise Jesus." Anyway, let's take a break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
In 1966, Anton LaVey created the Church of Satan, marking the beginning of the Age of Fire and Year 1 Anno Satanas. In 1969, he published the Satanic Bible, codifying Satanism as a religion, the first time it's been done in human history.
In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, king of hell, come forth from the pit, bestow the blessings of hell upon us. For we are your children, and we invoke thee this night.
In 2001, I was appointed High Priest of the Church of Satan. In 2007, I published the Satanic Scriptures, further defining and expanding on Satanic philosophy and greater magic ritual.
Hail, Satan full of might! Hail, Satan full of might! Our allegiance is with thee! Our allegiance is with thee! Cursed are they! Cursed are they! The God adorers! The God adorers! And cursed are the worshippers! And cursed are the worshippers! Of the Nazarene eunuch! Of the Nazarene eunuch!
For the past 50 years, the Church of Satan has stood as the sole organization to define and defend Satanism as a religion. And though pretenders to the infernal throne have come and gone, we have stood the test of time and will into the future. Visit churchofsatan.com for more information and read the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Scriptures. Knowledge is the solution for ignorance. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan!
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. There are many ways to listen to Satansplain: Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and more. Not to mention right on the official website itself, satansplain.com. Please visit and like Satansplain on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube if you use any of those. All of the links can be found on satansplain.com. For comments, questions, Satanacdotes, and all that, you can email me. bill@satansplain.com is the email address. In other media news, I may be featured on a particular show on Comedy Central this week. I don't know yet. I'm still waiting to hear back. We'll see. But yeah, something Satanism related. They contacted the Church of Satan. They wanted one of us for a segment. I was sort of tapped for it. I said yes. We'll see what happens. We also got an email from Talk TV in the UK, who initially said they wanted to have one of us on. I talked with the producer. They said they would get back to me. They never did. Like I said earlier in the show, this sort of thing happens from time to time. Speaking of email and Satansplaining, let's get to Gabriella Swerling of the Telegraph. She initially had tried reaching out to the Church of Satan through Twitter. Somebody on our Twitter team then told her to go contact the Church of Satan directly through the website, which makes more sense anyway, because, no 280 character limit that way, or 240, or whatever the hell it is. And here is what she wrote. Hello. I'm a journalist for the Telegraph newspaper based in the UK, and I'm researching an article about the rise of Satanism in England and Wales based on the results from last month's census. The number of people in England and Wales identifying as Satanists saw a 167% increase between 2011 and 2021. The Office for National Statistics, ONS, researchers found that within that 10-year period, the number of Satanists rose from 1,893 to 5,054. The data formed part of the same publication set, which showed that Christians now account for less than half of England and Wales' population for the first time in census history. I am looking to speak to someone from your organization about the rise of Satanism, why it is becoming increasingly popular, particularly in England and Wales, as well as worldwide, and whether or not you think this is linked to the decline of Christianity. I'd be grateful if I could speak to someone as soon as possible about this. If it is easier for you to contact me via mobile, please do. And she gives her phone number, which I'm tempted to give here in the air, but I won't. Many thanks indeed for taking the time to read this, and I hope to hear from you soon. Kind regards, Gabriella. Now, Magus Peter H. Gilmore, High Priest of the Church of Satan, then personally wrote a response and sent it directly back to her. And Magus Gilmore then shared it with the rest of us in the Council of Nine. I asked him if I could read it here in Satansplain, both the original letter from Gabriella and his response, and he said yes. So I now read you his reply. I'm going to pause here and there to interject a few thoughts of my own along the way, but here we go. Greetings. Your message on Twitter was forwarded to me. I do not speak to any journalists via phone. Questions are asked and answered via email only. And on a side note, you may be asking what's wrong with taking an interview question by phone. I mean, Bill, when you were on Coast to Coast AM, wasn't that over the phone? Well, yeah, that was, but that was also a live broadcast. I would say the problem with newspaper journalists who try taking notes by phone is that you typically end up not having a record of what you said, and you have no idea what they're really writing down. Good way to get things wrong. Again, one of those articles I did with Vice comes to mind, because they did something like that. But continuing with Magus Peter H. Gilmore's reply. Also, it is our long-standing policy to never give out membership figures or to endanger local members with journalistic contact, since our world is currently an increasingly unstable arena wherein terrorism and bigotry are inciting punitive violence against people who might be considered threatening because they may be different from the majority in any community. Here are some concepts from which you might quote. And note what Magus Gilmore said here, from which you might quote. Obviously, we don't expect journalists to quote verbatim in its entirety. We know that they won't do that. We know that journalists are often looking for sound bites, self-contained catchy quotes they can use. So those are things to keep in mind. Continuing with the letter. Satanism began as a religion with the founding of the Church of Satan in 1966 by Antoine Szandor LaVey. Membership became international within the first year of its existence. We've had residents of the UK on our membership roster since the late 1960s. I have been the head of the Church of Satan since April 30th, 2001, and we held an international conclave in your nation in 2008. Individuals who identify with Christianity have generally declined in Western nations, particularly since the 1960s when alternative religions published readily accessible literature and had practitioners who could be open about their beliefs. The repeal of the UK anti-witchcraft law in 1951 allowed neo-pagans to emerge from their secrecy, since prior to then, there is a long-standing history of Christian-dominated European governments imprisoning, torturing, and executing anyone convicted of heresy and witchcraft. Even atheists, and Satanism is a form of atheism, could find themselves pariahs if they admitted their choice to forego having faith in any form of supernatural deity. Now, the social stigmas and legal penalties have largely evaporated, so people are not forced into accepting the religions of their parents and families. They are free to select from a wide range of belief systems, which they find to be satisfying in leading productive, fulfilling lives. In the UK, people are often likely to answer official questions with cheeky replies. So one could readily expect plenty of people simply responding in a humorously impudent manner when it comes to such a census. And just to add to this point here, people in the UK and other countries did this some years ago by writing in Jedi on a census form asking for religious preference, and almost 400,000 people in the UK did that. I'm not making that up. You can look up a page on Wikipedia. There's a page on Wikipedia called The Jedi Census Phenomenon, where this is talked about. So if we're concerned with 5,000 people writing Satanism and saying, ooh, this is a dangerous rise in Satanism, well, we had 400,000 people write in Jedi. Does this mean the media should be afraid of, lightsaber accidents? I don't know. Anyway, back to the letter from the Church of Satan. However, Satanism has been a growing religion, particularly since we've seen our literature translated into numerous languages, and it often finds people from many nations who see themselves reflected in our writings, who might consider themselves Satanists without joining our organization. The internet has assisted people to learn about the Church of Satan as well as many other philosophies. In recent years, we've witnessed a growth of activists who call themselves Satanists as a form of rebellion, an attempt to resist what they consider to be authoritarian, intolerant religious organizations. They are often unaware of Satanism as a codified religion and simply adopt that identification as a form of protest. That youths might want to differentiate themselves by using imagery associated with Satanism, but who have not actually read any literature or grasped the individual position of self-deification promoted by the Church of Satan, has been in play since heavy metal bands used blasphemy, diabolical lyrics, and demonic symbols to define that music genre. Marilyn Manson's early success had many of his fans considering themselves Satanists just because they enjoyed his music and imagery, even though it was solely his own artistic vision and not a form of proselytizing for Satanism. And I want to pause the letter here just to interject a couple of points. So yeah, we've seen people do that with, people in the 1980s thinking, I'm really into this heavy metal. I draw pentagrams on the wall. Haha, I'm a Satanist. People in the 90s with Marilyn Manson's music. I draw pentagrams. Haha, I'm a Satanist. People in the 70s before that, I would add, cult dabblers with the rise of the witchcraft phenomenon. Some people fancying themselves Satanists, not really doing anything having to do with Satanism, really. And, of course, these days, people who think that just hating Republicans is enough to be a Satanist. So, not a new phenomenon. Continuing with the letter. Some authoritarian governments are currently promoting Christianity as a means for spreading conservative values. Thus, governments legally enforcing theism is a returning development. Also, Christianity currently has a growing lunatic fringe, considering that the QAnon followers consider themselves Christians and they have invented prolific and implausible conspiracy theories which seem to see an infernal enemy standing against their political heroes. Unfortunately, some current activist groups actually fulfill their fears in a weak attempt to displace Christianity, thinking that if what they call Satanism enters into arenas where prayer and Christian symbolism have been displayed, that Christians will give up what has previously been their hegemony. Of course, that trick never works. Christians across the spectrum of adherence to that mythology believe that their religion is true, and thus they fight back, especially against anyone who is a self-proclaimed ally of their mythical Satan. Science, reason, and education has increased progressive secularism over the course of history, but faith continues to hold fast, particularly in times of social upheaval, as fear and insecurity leads many to seek a supernatural solution to man-made problems. Signed, Magus Peter H. Gilmore, High Priest, Church of Satan. So that was the reply. It was a lengthy reply, but again, lots of quotable lines. Quotable lines you could have used in an article. Now then, did Gabriella Swerling from the Telegraph ever use any bits of this in her article? Any of those quotable lines, which I don't know about you, but I could see, again, even being in one of those block quotes in the middle of an article? No, she didn't use any of it. Did she at least mention Peter Gilmore in the article? No. Does she mention the Church of Satan in the article? I mean, surely the name would come up on an article like this. Nope, doesn't appear at all. Did Gabriella Swerling even thank us for the reply? No. So, what sort of article did Gabby write for this supposed rise of Satanism in the UK, if none of the above? Well, let's read the article that she wrote. The headline of Gabriella's article is, instead, about some schmuck from the Global Order of Satan UK, which is what? I mean, as far as I know, it could be just a social media page. I don't know. I've never heard of them before now. Headline, Young Sacrifice Belief in God on the Altar of Satanism. Ooh, crafty. Subtitle, Leaders of the religion claim its opportunities for people to engage in activism on issues such as gender and sexuality is appealing. What? Last I checked, you can be an activist for those ideas without bringing Satanism into the picture. But the article begins with a quote. With our rituals, there's never any murder, there's never any sacrifice, there's never any blood rites to Satan. We don't worship the devil. We don't cast magic spells. Well, that sounds accurate, at least. Was this some other Satanist from the Church of Satan who was quoted? Or at least some Satanist who maybe isn't a formal member of the Church of Satan, but, you know, at least getting their description of satanic ritual from books like the Satanic Bible? No, of course not. It's some guy named Chaplain Leopold of the Global Order of Satan UK. Oh boy, here we go. Another reinventor of the wheel. Global Order of Satan UK. So is it global or is it UK based? I don't know. Anyway, the article says, in fact, as the Global Order of Satan UK, as well as other leaders and members of satanic groups around the world insist, it would be difficult to spot a Satanist walking down the street. And humorously enough, this is printed right under a staged photo of, I'm guessing, Chappie Leo here, in a cloak, holding a book with a pentagram, wearing a skull mask. Oh yeah, I'm sure there are people who walk by that guy in the street. Don't assume he's a Satanist. They assume he's just a Quaker or something. Okay. Yet, while the macabre occult rituals, virgin sacrifices, chalices of blood, and belief in the actual devil are a thing of the past, Satanism is luring increasing numbers of young people disillusioned with outdated and dogmatic traditional religions to join its fold by offering a, quote, alternative to, quote, stuffy traditional faiths. Well, yes, Gabby, and we already pointed that out that this is nothing new, nothing, young people who are feeling rebellious and are drawn to Satanism or a caricature of Satanism. The Sunday Telegraph has spoken to leaders and members of satanic groups around the world, okay, I guess that's where we're acknowledged, who claim that the opportunities Satanism offers people to engage in activism and campaign on issues such as gender and sexuality is part of the appeal for the younger members, particularly those who are increasingly less likely to declare themselves as Christian. Well, that's certainly, I don't think, what we said. Chaplain Leopold, a 32-year-old London-based undertaker, co-runs the Global Order of Satan UK, which he said has seen a 200% increase in membership over the last 5 years. So does that mean that he had a social media page and the numbers went from 4 to 12, 3 to 9, 1 to 3? Was it him and 5 years later he gets 2 friends to join? Or how many of his members are people from Nigeria who think he's the Illuminati? I wonder. Anyway, skipping a little further down the article. According to the Office for National Statistics census published in November, the number of people in England and Wales identifying as Satanists saw a 167% increase between 2011 and 2021, up from 1,893 to 5,054. I read that earlier. So I already commented on this earlier. One additional thing I'll add is that during this same time, the overall population of England and Wales increased by about 3.5 million people. I looked it up. So go figure. Again, we have to wonder how many people were writing in Satanist, as a joke on their census form. I think the whole phenomenon is a bit strange. I'm not in the UK, so I don't know if it's any different there, but here in the US, I really don't recall ever writing Satanist into a census form. Another thing I have to wonder is, did they include it as a checkbox this year, whereas in past years you had to write it in? Because, that way I could see people maybe doing that as a goof. In any case, don't most people, Satanist or not, throw their census away? So, again, how are you getting an accurate number? Continuing with the article. At the same time, the number of Christians dropped so low that they now account for less than half of England and Wales' population for the first time in census history. The census data prompted the Archbishop of York to insist that Christianity is not in, quote, terminal decline, and that Jesus suffered setbacks, so Christians will too. The figures revealed that 46.2% of the population, 27.5 million people, described themselves as Christian in 2021, marking a 13.1% point decrease from 59.3%, 33.3 million people in 2011. However, the census also revealed an uptick in other less traditional religions, with the number of pagans up from 56,620 to 73,733, as well as a rise in the number of animists, people who believe that all natural things have a soul. They increased from 541 in 2011 to 802 animists in 2021. Academics claim, I just thought of something, an animist writing animist into a census report. Do they think the tree that made the paper for the census was, had a soul? Anyway, I don't know. Academics claim that this is indicative of a wider trend, but maybe it is weirder too. Indicative of a wider trend. Dr. David Robertson, senior lecturer in religious studies at the Open University, said, "The appeal of a lot of new religions, including Satanism, is that they offer a form of religion that directly addresses the social issues that matter more to the young people, especially their willingness to be activists. And not only do they offer an opportunity for this sort of stuff to actively challenge laws, but also appeal to the activists among the young people." Well, if Gabby was a competent journalist, this would have been the perfect point to insert one of the quotes from the Church of Satan letter response I just read. In fact, let me reread a few sentences from that letter. Peter Gilmore said, "In recent years, we've witnessed a growth of activists who call themselves Satanists as a form of rebellion, an attempt to resist what they consider to be authoritarian, intolerant religious organizations. They are often unaware of Satanism as a codified religion and simply adopt that identification, that label of Satanist, as a form of protest. That youths might want to differentiate themselves by using imagery associated with Satanism, but who have not actually read any literature or grasped the individual position of self-deification promised by the Church of Satan, has been in play since heavy metal bands use blasphemy, diabolical lyrics, and demonic symbols to define that musical genre." And again, the example with Marilyn Manson and his fans, the other examples I gave. But once again, Gabby doesn't quote any of this, doesn't insert any of this. Our article continues. She titles the next section, "Satanism is a young person's religion." Well, speaking as a guy in his late 40s, I guess it's kind of flattering. I don't know. Professor Linda Woodhead, no comment, head of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at King's College London, added that Satanism, quote, is a young person's religion, but that, quote, the bigger phenomenon we're seeing is the incredible diversification of the religious and spiritual landscape. There's now a lot of solitary exploration, particularly with the internet, and you can find anything to fit your particular identity, interests, values, or beliefs. Well, I mean, that last part is right. People are taking up things they read about on Wikipedia without much of any other investment or research, whatever it is. But where does this professor get the idea that Satanism is a young person's religion, or the professor before? I mean, I suppose younger Satanists may be a little more outward in their appearance when it comes to aesthetics. And it's among young people we see some of the loud people screaming, I am a Satanist, whether they are or not. But to think that older Satanists don't exist is just silly. I mean, has this professor ever watched the documentary film Satanis? Any other Church of Satan films, for that matter? It's not filled with teenagers. However, the Reverend Diarmaid MacCulloch, Emeritus Professor of the History of the Church at the University of Oxford, said, I'd say that these are all symptoms of people who've been disappointed by other religions or who may only know them superficially and who are looking for a system of belief to make their own, since our society encourages individual consumer choice and research. So Gabby quotes professors and a Christian reverend, but not the Church of Satan in this. Of course, the article from here just gets worse. Contrary to the stereotypes, only a fringe minority of Satanists actually worship the devil. Actually, no Satanists worship the devil. A person who worships the devil is a devil worshiper, not a Satanist. Instead, the religion's fascination with Satan is more metaphorical, identifying with the figure of the rebel as epitomized in the protagonist of John Milton's 17th century epic poem, Paradise Lost. I keep seeing people say this. Oh, it's like Paradise Lost, Paradise Lost, Paradise Lost. How many of the people who say this, I wonder, have read Paradise Lost? I mean, the Church of Satan, we do list Paradise Lost in the Church of Satan suggested book list, along with titles from Nietzsche, Carl Jung, Machiavelli, H.L. Mencken, and dozens of other authors. There are reasons to include Paradise Lost, but again, I have to wonder how many of the people who are quick to bring up Paradise Lost have read it, or would even know why those other authors I mentioned would be just as satanic, philosophically speaking, if not more so. Next line in the article. Satanists generally do not believe in a higher power and instead revolve around a religion, quote, of the self, believing that it is up to individuals to define their own moral code and to develop themselves as their own godheads. All right, not completely inaccurate here, but probably the most accurate thing she's written so far. Rituals used as a form of community bonding. Ew. I don't do ritual to bond with the community. Even when we do group ritual, it's not for the community. See the essay, Myth of the Satanic Community, sometime to see what I'm saying. Continuing. However, this does not preclude Satanists from having fun getting together and doing rituals in the forest, by candlelight, encircled and enrobed. Chaplain Leopold said that ritual is used as a form of community bonding, gag, and meditation to give people the time to develop, quote, your own personal vision of yourself and Satan. Well, that's where Gabby is pulling the quote from, and Leopold seems to be pulling that concept of ritual from his ass. I don't know. Despite this, Chaplain Leopold says that because of the stigma associated with Satanism, many people may not feel comfortable to declare themselves as affiliated with the religion. Well, yeah, it does have that stigma because it's supposed to. It's Satan, the Prince of Darkness. This is the hypocrisy I find so silly. People who want to call themselves Satanists and what they're doing Satanism, but at the same time are into the communal bond and healing and social justice and empathy. Sorry, it doesn't work like that. It's like the Bikers for Christ or white witchcraft or Christian metal or those bumper stickers in the 1990s that said, mean people suck. It's you're trying to be both a self-righteous do-gooder and a badass at the same time. And sorry, that doesn't work. Oh, golly gee, I don't understand why people find the label of Satanist so standoffish. Because that's the fucking point. We're not here to join the circle of humanity. I mean, if you got anything out of Paradise Lost, wouldn't it be that? Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, I think the quote is. And of course, Gabby closes her article with 2 quotes from Guess Who. Malcolm Jerry, co-founder of the Satanic Temple based in Salem, Massachusetts, suggested that the ONS figures were a drastic underestimate. He says that his organization, founded in 2012, has 21,996 members registered from the UK and around 1 million followers worldwide. Malcolm Jerry, by the way, is a pseudonym of film director Kevin Soling, though who knows who the hell is signing off his letters with the name Malcolm Jerry these days. As far as the Satanic Temple numbers go, well, considering all you have to do to be a member is sign up for our mailing list, and that they have paid members who don't even identify as Satanists in some cases, well, I wouldn't trust their numbers. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a dirty, rotten gatekeeper. Continuing, quote, the demographics of the Satanic Temple membership are fairly broad, but certainly younger people tend to be more engaged in activism, so they are more visible, he added. I think our rise in popularity is founded on our having a set of principles and values that resonate with many people and our rejection of hypocrisy and corruption. Yes, Kevin, you've gotten a rise in popularity because with your 7 tenets and other stunts, you appeal to the masses. You appeal to the collective. That is the very opposite of Satanism. As for a religion of hypocrisy and corruption, I would say your organization is anything but a fighter against that. But, I mean, that would take a whole other episode to explain. So that's the end of Gabriella Swerling's article from the UK's Telegraph newspaper. Some people might argue that I shouldn't have given her rag this much attention. I thought, however, that her questions, our response, and her article served as a good example of what can go wrong with journalism and Satanism these days. Again, there are indeed some people who get it right. Journalists who get it right should be commended. And no, getting it right doesn't necessarily mean kissing our ass. I know a lot of people don't realize this, but it's possible to be objectively reporting on a subject without praising it. But the concept of being an objective journalist, again, just seems to be lost on so many. I suppose I could end this episode of Satansplain here, but let's leave on a somewhat of an up note instead. As long as we've brought the Satanic Temple up, I'd like to read a bit of news from Queersatanic. The Queersatanic website and social media channels are by a group of 4 ex-members from the Satanic Temple, whom the Satanic Temple has been trying to sue. I've talked to people from the group here and there. I've talked to some of the Queersatanic people. Granted, Queersatanic and I have our share of personal disagreements when it comes to politics and religion, but we've put those sort of things all aside in our private correspondence. In any case, I'm going to read you a bit of big news from their blog from a couple of weeks ago. Federal judge in Washington state dismisses Salem Mass Corps' SLAPP suit for the 2nd time. So that's the headline. And for those who don't know, a SLAPP suit, S-L-A-P-P, SLAPP suit, stands for Strategic Laws Against Public Participation. So just to explain this concept quickly, it means a frivolous lawsuit, a lawsuit with no actual legal merit, whose only purpose is to more or less threaten the defendant into not criticizing the plaintiff. Here in the United States, we do have freedom of speech, and that includes being free to criticize anything. Free to criticize people, organizations, companies, so long as it's not something like slander or libel. If I hate Pepsi, for example, I have the freedom here in the United States to make an I Hate Pepsi Cola website. I can write a song about how much I hate Pepsi, print a book called Pepsi Sucks. What I can't do is print lies like, oh, Pepsi actually contains cyanide and arsenic and elephant manure, and that's what they put into the vats to make their drink. That would be slander, or actually that would be libel. Slander is when it's spoken, libel is when it's printed. But let's say, on the other hand, that my Pepsi Sucks book doesn't have any actual libel like that. It's all just personal opinion and anecdotes, no lies. That's perfectly legal. But what would happen if Pepsi tried to sue me anyway? Well, in an ideal world, we'd both show up in court. The judge would hear the argument and say, yeah, you Pepsi people are clueless. Bill is just saying he hates Pepsi. There's nothing illegal about that. It's not defamation. It's not libel. So Bill, the defendant, he wins. Case dismissed. You can both go home now. So that would be in an ideal world. Unfortunately, one thing that Pepsi might do instead is to take me to court and weaken me by dragging everything out. Show up to court on this date. No, wait, we've delayed it. The attorneys say they want to use this date instead. No, it's this date instead next year. Okay, oh, that date passed. We want to change the date to this. So meanwhile, me, the defendant, I'm paying all these fees for a decent attorney, for registration fees or whatever. PepsiCo has no problem throwing tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to do this because they can afford it. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. However, they know I can't afford it. I'm just this lonely citizen, and they hope that eventually I'll reach a point where I'll say, oh, forget it. I take back what I said about Pepsi. This has been dragging on for so long, and this legal battle is costing me too much. I'm out of money. I'm in debt now, and I accept your bargain to stop selling my book, and I'll delete my website if you drop the lawsuit. So the whole point of a company filing a SLAPP suit like that is not because they think they'll win the case, but because they think they'll silence and destroy the opposition. Now that you get a basic idea of what a SLAPP suit is, let me read the rest of this article. Seattle, Washington. For the second time in nearly 3 years of litigation, a federal district court in Washington state dismissed all claims made by the Satanic Temple against 4 of its former members. The court found that the federal claims, having been previously dismissed, lacked jurisdiction to hear the Satanic Temple's remaining state law claims. Quote, "We appreciate Judge Richard Jones confirming that the First Amendment still exists in this country," defendant David Johnson said. "Religions are not immune from public criticism." I would argue that the Satanic Temple isn't a religion at all. They're just a political stunt group who uses the name of an existing religion as a costume for those stunts. Like I said, they have many members who don't even identify as Satanists, but I digress. Moving on to the article. After a schism in March 2020 in the Washington State chapter, the temple alleged that then social media manager Johnson used what had been the local chapter's Facebook page to post criticism of the temple and how its leaders' actions had not lived up to the Satanic Temple's own stated tenets and values. This criticism came in the form of news articles, other former member testimonies, and past actions by Satanic Temple co-owners Kevin Soling and Doug Masico. Masico has also used the public pseudonyms Doug Mesner and Lucian Greaves for the temple, while Soling initially used the pseudonym Calvin Soling for the lawsuit, and uses Malcolm Jerry for the temple. Quote, "We are not the first people the temple has tried to bully or abuse into silence," defendant Leah Fishball said. "We were determined not to let the Satanic Temple intimidate us." In initial court filings, the Salem, Mass-based for-profit corporation United Federation of Churches, LLC, DBA, the Satanic Temple, tried to allege that they were victims of defamation. And let me pause here and quickly repeat that part. The for-profit corporation, the United Federation of Churches, LLC. This has been known for a while, but that corporation is one and the same with the Satanic Temple. They've even had the website registered with the same public postal address. The tax forms are filed under the same exact address. You can see this name in all the Satanic Temple's lawsuits. United Federation of Churches. They are the Satanic Temple. Make no mistake about it. Reading on. The court dismissed the defamation claim with prejudice in February 2021, citing First Amendment protections. But the remaining claims were dismissed with leave to refile. TST did so in March 2021, adding new claims, revising others, and dropping one. In April 2022, the temple's attempt at reconsideration failed, and all remaining federal claims also were dismissed. In June of 2022, Satanic Temple's lead counsel, Matt Kazaya, not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, admitted on his Reddit account that he needed to come up with, quote, a credible justification that is not impossible for a jury. A jury could legally award at least $75,000 in damages, and that he hoped legal defense costs squeezed, quote, every last penny from the defendant's living corpses and anyone that gives them the time of day. So let's recap here. Queersatanic said that the Satanic Temple is not been living up to their tenets, things like, empathy for all and all that bullshit. So the Satanic Temple is suing them, saying that they're wrong, and their attorney posts publicly things like this. How dare you say we don't embrace empathy? We're going to sue you to oblivion. Quote from defendant Nathan Sullivan. The Satanic Temple accused us of forming a competitor organization to their organization based on a Facebook comment saying the Satanic Temple 2 Electric Boogaloo. So the outcome was never really in doubt. But like the old saying, you can't beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. This SLAPP suit did what it was supposed to do to them. On a side note, the idea of the Satanic Temple accusing somebody else of being a competing satanic organization is one I find funny as a Church of Satan member, but I digress. This has been a strain on our families, relationships, on our financial security, and on our physical and mental health, defendant Leah Fishball said. I'm ready to finally have my life back. As of December 2022, total legal costs for the defendants exceeded $100,000. Well, I thought it was going to end this episode of Satansplain on an up note. The up note is that another one of these lawsuits got dismissed. In any case, thank you for listening to Satansplain. This is Magister Bill M., shamelessly elitist Church of Satan snob and proud gatekeeper of Satanism, saying until next time, hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2023, Magister Bill M.